We go back as usual little, and this section that starts on page 38 and goes on till the end of the canto. It is all about inspiration, which is actually also here often described as different modes of, you might say, a receiving of a direct knowledge. So, as I was just beginning to say, it's a description of the coming down of power, of light, of knowledge, of vision, of truth that enters into the consciousness of one who has made his being empty. His mind, life, ego are all still. Ego is wiped off, mind and life have become completely silent, and that is the precondition for receiving anything from a higher plane. Inspiration really means breathing in. You breathe in the energy which is possible for your lungs to be filled with fresh energy when they are completely empty. In the same way, when our mind is completely still, as the ancients said, chitta vritti nirodha, silence the mind, then only can direct knowledge enter into you. This is an experience that Sri Aurobindo had also acquired, ability he had acquired with the help of Lele, the silencing of the mind. This is the first precondition for knowledge. He is a seeker of knowledge, Ashwapati. Knowledge does not come by thought, it does not come by reasoning, it does not come by trying to analyze and trying to judge. All these actually interfere with knowledge. So this is the description of this force that enters into the being when the being is ready to receive it. Oft inspiration with her lightning feet, a sudden messenger from the all-seeing tops. She's only a transmitter. Traversed the soundless corridors of his mind, bringing her rhythmic sense of hidden things. So this is the first condition, the soundlessness of the mind. The corridors of the brain have to be completely empty. And in the play of the vibration of knowledge that comes into the being, the power and the vibration, he uses perhaps for that the image of rhythm. He has often emphasized the importance of rhythm. Rhythm is not just a regular beat, it is a force of a continuous transmission of a vibration. Energy is also a vibration. So there she brings in truths that are beyond the mind. If the mind is ready to be completely free of ego, absolutely still, it can receive. And so, beyond the mental speech, a music spoke. It's as if a greater harmony fills the being, whereas in the ordinary mind, there is mortal speech. Mind formulates thoughts, mind decides what is right and what is wrong. When we have gone beyond this, we have gone beyond the domain of understanding and mental judgment, the sense of the universal play of energy, which is essentially harmony. Manifestation of truth is in harmony, as Mother repeatedly tells us. Wherever there is disharmony, wherever there is discord, it is a sign that there is ignorance. So here you have the sense of the music, the harmony. A music spoke, transcending mortal speech. And then the image of the delight, as if from a golden phial of the all bliss, a joy of light, a joy of sudden sight, a rapture of the thrilled, undying word, poured into his heart as into an empty cup, a repetition of God's first delight, creating in a young and virgin time. You get the image. Several images have been packed into this one sentence. Creation, manifestation is the result of the Ananda the divine takes in pouring himself into a play of existence. The supreme Brahman is beyond time and space. But when he decides to put himself, project himself into manifestation, it is because he takes joy in doing this. When the artist or the poet pours himself out into his creation, whether he is a painter or a musician or a poet, it is doing as if he is putting his whatever he has received from beyond into a world of time and space, into a framework of manifestation, but actually what comes from above. So he is first of all speaking of the delight of manifestation, which is bliss, the essence of creation. The Upanishads also say all is born from Ananda, all lives in Ananda, all returns to Ananda. That is the one condition. So here he uses the image of the file, because perhaps this is an occult alchemy that was, sought after by many early sages to find the true secrets of the universal joy. The essence, the distilled essence, that's why it's the file, where the distillation of the essence of the delight of existence was brought down to these two forms: the secret of eternal youth, the secret of eternal love. Eternal youth means immortality. The essence where there is no degradation, no deterioration, the sustaining of the energy, the same delight of existence, and the play of that Ananda, which spreads out in waves of joy and therefore of love, because where there is Ananda, there is joy, and there is love, and there is beauty, because he describes Ananda, Sri Aurobindo, as a triple term of beauty, love and joy. Without love there cannot be joy. So this is what the ancient alchemists, they were occultists, they always knew that somehow we have to find that secret, which we don't know if they did, but if they did, it is lost, that secret. But it is a distillation of the essence of the power of existence. The purpose of existence is bliss. It's not to spend time on the earth for a certain number of years, accumulate as much experience and knowledge that we can, and then leave after a while. This is what they did not consider as worthwhile. That we should sustain and be capable of holding that joy and transmitting it in waves of love, in waves of harmony, in waves of delight. That expression is the word, with a capital W. Word is a projection, it's an expression of the experience. From the silence is projected the force of expression, the silent consciousness, which is one with that source of all light. And then when that speaks, this is the inspired word. It's coming into play in the form of sound. There is the force of sound, which is vibration, which is harmony. So this is the power of Shruti, the vision, which is Drishti, which projects itself in sound. So this is what he himself was. Sri Aurobindo did that all the time. He's describing actually himself. This whole canto, or in fact, most of the poem is himself. A rapture of the thrilled, undying word. It is the eternal conscious force. So, word is conscious force. It's a projection of that truth which comes out in the form of conscious force. In fact, every word is a projection of force. We should be careful of the words we say. It projects maybe our lower nature, our impurities. It is a putting into the atmosphere something which could be harmful, which often is harmful, or putting in the atmosphere an expression of beauty and truth and joy and light. This is what is the great word. This is where you have it in the Bible, I think, St. John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's a projection of Himself. So His words are Himself. You get that same experience if you listen to Mother's voice. That vibration of conscious truth, which even if we don't understand all the words mentally, there is the experience of some power of light which can transport us to some other world of experience. So this joy came into the heart of the poet, an inspired person, a poet. A poet is one who is actually a recipient of light, of joy. He receives, he transmits. He does not generate the truth, the thought, the knowledge. He is not a thinker, he is not a philosopher, he is not a seeker of knowledge. He is simply one who receives. The artist receives and he transmits. And if we can do the transmission without any distortion, any diminution, then that art, the poem or the music, is raised to another level of higher experience. And Mother has spoken so much of the music or the world of painting. Sri Aurobindo doesn't usually speak of painting and poetry, of painting and music. He dwells on the field of poetry, but it's the same thing, the sense of beauty and harmony which contain the divine essence. It is not a mental knowledge. And actually, this poem is just that. We just become quiet and allow the words, the sounds, the rhythms to flow through us. It can even raise us to somewhere near the source, if we can be completely quiet and empty. It doesn't matter if we don't understand. It reminds me of a little incident long ago. This is what Amrita Das said. When he first came, he was very young, and he started reading a little bit of the Life Divine, the first paragraph. Sri Aurobindo, he told Sri Aurobindo, I don't understand anything, but I love to read this. He said, that's enough. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. And that is perhaps even better because it flows through you without your interference. The understanding often interferes. So I don't know if I should take this class. It should just be. Often I've told myself that.
Please don't tell.
Because it has to pour into the heart, and the heart has to be empty. A repetition of God's first delight, creating in a young and virgin time. The divine creates not because he has to. He's the supreme, he's not obliged. He does it because he wants to. A true creation is made because you want to create, not because you are asked to do something. If you are asked to paint a picture, it's not really the same as when you can't help it, you have to paint a picture. It has come to you and you just pour it out of yourself. So this is the first delight of manifestation, and each time inspiration comes, it's the same ananda. First delight, first time, creating for the first time in young time. Before that there was no creation. And then he created time, and then he put the manifestation in the world of time. Because before time and space there was no creation. There was nothing, there was only the Brahman, the Absolute. And when he wanted to project himself into manifestation, he first created the framework, you could call it, of time and space. All things exist only in time and space. So the first time he made it, it was virgin time. In that he really put himself. Because when you create, you put yourself in your creation. Everyone is really revealed in his creation. Whatever the nature of the creation is, you can recognize the artist in his art. You can recognize the poet in his poem. Something of his essential nature is in the world. So if you love the world, you love the divine. If you love nature, he has built this universe. If you can recognize him in all things, there is no need to go visiting pilgrimages. He is there everywhere. In a brief moment, quote, a little space, all knowledge packed into great wordless thoughts. The entire truth is there in every atom, in every particle. Mother keeps on repeating it, every cell of her body. It is not a sense of something universal only. The universe is in the tiniest particles and atoms and cells of manifestation. The contradictions of what is high, what is low, what is vast, what is small, all these are mind-built. In the tiniest moment, shortest moment of revelation, you may see suddenly the flash of an entire truth. Revelation, because we can't hold on to those moments for too long. It is difficult to sustain that sense of emptiness and purity. But if we could be continuously transmitting, experiencing, manifesting that truth, which is what is supposed to be one of the purposes of our consciousness. Not to transmit falsehood, not to transmit things that are twisted, because that is the nature of mind that likes to divide right versus wrong, true versus false. But to be absolutely aware that it's all the divine manifestation. Whatever I am, good or bad or ugly, doesn't really matter. It is His will. It is just, that is why again and again the sense of opening, the sense of surrender, the sense of to be completely receptive and transmit it. So each one of us becomes a channel that carries a certain amount of consciousness. If we receive the divine consciousness, we transmit it all around us. So, in a brief moment, quote, in a little space, how much is the human mind and the human heart? How much is human time? It's a brief moment. We live only a moment in eternity. But in that little, you might say, moment of existence, we can transmit in the infinite. Sometimes you have certain poets who say that. You have to see the world in a grain of sand, heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, eternity in an hour. You remember Rumo? Yeah, of course. So that sense is there for those who are mystics. These are mystics. You don't have to wait an eternity. 1 minute it can become eternal, manifest the eternal. All knowledge packed into great wordless thought. Just the vibration, the light, the delight, the beauty, not transmitted by mental understanding, lodged, that came into him first, not in the form, it has to finally transmit itself in language. Sri Aurobindo admits it, and Mother too, because when we have to write, we have to use an intellectual form. We haven't yet found what is the supramental language. So it is still an intellectual language. But in the beginning, the descent of the light has to come in simply wordless form. All knowledge packed into great wordless thoughts, lodged in the expectant stillness of his depths. Expectant in the sense attentive, open, receptive, waiting to simply accept what is given without judging, without preference. And that is why the individual, the yogi or the poet, because they are very similar at their highest heights, becomes like a crystal. The crystal receives the light, and then the white light breaks into the 7 lights, passes through the crystal. So the one manifests itself in the many, but it's still the one. We focus on the many. They have all the different colors, but what comes in is the one, manifesting itself in all things, in all moments, in all activities. A crystal of the ultimate absolute, a portion of the inexpressible truth, revealed by silence to the silent soul. So repeatedly in these few lines, the sense of stillness, the sense of absolute receptivity and opening, which has to precede the ability to manifest the truth. There can be no mental interference, because the moment that comes in, the expression is spoiled. Mother spoke to us, I remember, in the class about music. And she had heard a piece of music, which was a piece of Sunilda's music. And she said, this is the first time I heard a piece without a whole. There was no whole in the sense, H-O-L-E. Because inspired artists and musicians also are artists, receive. And they play with sounds. It's like making a fabric. Threads pass and they make a fabric. But later the poet or the artist or the musician will revise and say, this is not good, this I must change, this I should alter, this I can improve. And each time he thinks he's improving, he's making a hole in the fabric. He's spoiling that descent of consciousness that came uninterrupted, like a flow into his being. So when she had heard that piece, she said, the first time I hear a piece of music without a whole. There's no interference by the individual. Whatever has come, and that is being transmitted. The intense creatrix in his stillness wrote. She is the inspiration. She is the energy. She brings down the force. She transmits the force. If the being is absolutely empty, in his stillness wrought, worked, past old-fashioned form of worked. She worked very hard, because usually we use the term today, wrought, working on things that are very resistant to change, like metal or stone. But in man, I think there is a greater resistance in his mind. So, to work inside the human being, in his nature, her power, fallen speechless, grew more intimate, became one with his being. Intimate, she went within. It is not that she's bringing something from beyond only. She blends with the person, she enters into the being, she transmits it, and he is really swept away by that expression. She looked upon the seen and the unforeseen. It's not an, you see the truth, you see the outer world of nature, you can see flowers and birds. But if you are inspired, you don't only see forms. Of course, the forms are beautiful. And you take delight in that expression and that description. So there are so many artists who speak, or poets who speak about the beauty of nature. But not just the outer beauty, which is actually her definition of what is beauty. Beauty is, she says, the expression of the divine presence in the form, in matter. To be able to recognize the play of that divine presence in the world of outer form and to respond to that. So that is what is not just unseen but unforeseen. Give you the image of something that is almost like a prophet. You go beyond the mind. Unguessed domains, she made her native field. Unknown worlds beyond the mind. We don't, the force of inspiration is, it's such an energy that comes. Like the word mantra. Sri Aurobindo has written so many chapters in future poetry where he discusses this term, mantra. It transmits the conscious force, the experience of the conscious force in sound, in expression. And it is not words, it is a vibration of a divine conscious force. This is why they are so powerful. They can transcend time. A mantra that was written or uttered, usually in India it was always uttered, not written for a long time, uttered thousands of years ago, still conveys the same intensity of light, of change. It has a transformative power. It conveys not truth, but it can change the person who knows how to receive the truth and utter it. Even if we know how to utter, this whole poem is mantric. If I know how to allow the sounds of the poem to pass through me, through my voice, through my lungs, through my mouth, it's bound to have some effect on the person, on the being. It's not so easy because the rest of the being has not been purified, had not been perfected. So there is a falling back into the old state of ignorance and unconsciousness. But all the same, it leaves a stamp upon the being. That is one reason why Mother often says, you read Sri Aurobindo, you read the Mother, you read the prayers of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, you read Savitri. It does have an effect even in our bodily life, not just in our heart and our soul. Because there is no contradiction between the world of matter, which is also something that transmits the spirit. Unguessed domains, she made her native field. Domains, kingdoms, territories. Inspiration would enter into any field of light and power and knowledge. Inspiration is not only for art. Mother spoke of certain scientists, the true inventors. They all start by having a certain flash of inspiration, which later is worked upon by an analytical mind. But at its origin, there is a creative process. It's not the same as a discoverer, but it is the creative process, and that comes as a flash. And so here he will imply, I think, things like intuition, revelation, inspiration. These are sister faculties. They are not exactly the same, but there's a breaking down of the resistance that is there in the mental nature. There's an opening of the being towards worlds of light, of knowledge, of truth, of power, of beauty, of reality, which are always there, which we have closed ourselves from. We have closed up our being. We live in our little shell of ignorance and think we know a lot, which we don't. All vision gathered into a single ray, one flash, breaking down of the opposition, as when the eyes stare at an invisible point, till through the intensity of one luminous spot, an apocalypse of a world of images enters into the kingdoms of the seer. Apocalypse is revelation. It's the breaking down of the opposition. And this was part of the training in certain schools of Indian spirituality. The concentration on one point. And when the entire focus of the whole being, mind, life, body, is concentrated on one point, it was said to bring a breakthrough and one can enter into the eternal. This was a training that certain yogas, certain schools of, we had 6 schools of philosophy in ancient India, and one of them particularly in the Sankhya, this was taught. You concentrate on just any one point. And Mother refers to this in many places. Just concentrate on anything. It can be a dot on a page. But if all the energies of your being are completely into that concentration, it takes you, as she says in her phrase, to the other side. You break out of it and you enter into an infinity. An infinity of light, an infinity of knowledge, an infinity. That smallness takes you into the infinite. Where the mental distinctions between what is a small dot is not a small dot. It's a starting point of entering into connection with the vast. Like the drop of water that becomes one with the ocean. When it falls in the ocean, there is no drop of water. The individual mind, the individual consciousness becomes part of the all. A great nude arm of splendor suddenly rose. So then, after this vision, after this consciousness, arm, that now here he uses the image of expression. It's not enough to see, to receive, to perceive. It is also necessary to manifest, to express. That is one reason why Mother, who was herself a very fine artist, spoke so much about training the faculties, training your hand, training your eyes, to be able to express what you have received. Or, I don't remember now who said it, the genius is 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. The preparation of the being, the training, the ability to be true to what one receives. I receive, I see, I have a vision, but I don't have the words. I don't know how to say. what I have seen, because I lack language. It's really it's a very frustrating thing. Man is often capable of receiving. He doesn't realize how often. But since he has not prepared his outer being, he has not trained and mastered the instrumentation has to be also prepared. Whether it's your eye, whether it's your hand, whether it's your voice, whatever art you follow. If I have the ability to, I want to be a sculptor, but I must know how to sculpt. Then only the vision that I have can be transmitted by my hand. Otherwise, it is truly a form of tragedy. We have the ability and we can't transmit ourselves. We are divided between the lower inability, the lower incapacity, a failure, and yet some part in us is open. And that is very unfortunate. So here the image of the arm, the arm that works out the divine force, the consciousness, and the executive power of that consciousness. She works out, the mother is the executive power of the Lord. She knew how to put things into expression in the work of everyday life, not just in art, in everyday living, to be able to transmit that experience without distortion. What we usually do is there is a diminution, there is a distortion, there is an inability. I don't know how to paint well enough. So when I see my picture that I have painted, I say, it's not quite what I saw, but I can't do better than this. And it's really a pity, because we have the ability to rise very high sometimes. Or we don't rise, inspiration lifts us up, fills us with her energy, her vision. And then the lower nature is blocked. It can't transmit. But Ashwapati has prepared his being. There's a whole period of training, of sadhana that precedes. And then when the reception comes, when the power comes, the individual becomes the channel. So a great nude arm of splendor suddenly rose. It rent the gauze opaque of nescience, ignorance, where there is no light. It is very difficult to cut gauze, I think. It's not tight enough. That power has to break down the resistance, which is not always a material resistance. It is a psychological acceptance of our ignorance. How to break out of this curtain of ignorance that is inside. If I can't do it, I can ask her to do it for me. If I can open myself to her. That is again something she has said. If you have a difficulty, call me. Call me. Why don't you call me? I'll do it for you. This means I don't have any pride in myself, in my own ability, and then I can become again a transmitter. Because the gauze of nescience, of ignorance, is very difficult even to break out of. It's everywhere, in every part of our nature. In the lower nature, certainly, but there is also in what we call our higher nature. My mind is full of ignorance. I think it has light, but very little light. My heart is full of ignorance. I really have only a little ability to love. Otherwise, I have preferences and all predilections and ready-made approaches to things. I cannot see the whole. I cannot feel one with the all. I've already divided myself into a little individual. If I know how to love, I have to love the all. and I am not capable. She can do it for me if I allow her to do it. So it rent the gauze opaque of nescience. Her lifted fingers' keen, unthinkable tip bared with a stab of flame, the closed beyond. Therefore, you have knowledge, which is also power. Her finger, her hand, her power can break the resistance of ignorance, of inertia, of acceptance of our permanent state of unconsciousness. We say, I am unconscious, I am weak, I am a human being, I am not divine. And somewhere within us, we are attached to this. And that is what makes it difficult even more. So she is a very dynamic power that can break down this resistance and unite the lower with the higher, unite the individual with the all, unite the small, separate existence, recognizing that it is part of the all experience, whether in time or space, whether past and present and future, they are all already there in the world of perfection. We receive them a little at a time. That is why the beyond is what we may call the unknown, what we may call the future, but it's already there. It's the future that prepares the past. The future precedes the beginning. It's for the end that the whole story unfolds. We are here for a purpose. That purpose preceded our coming. He has a plan. But we have no idea what the final stage shall be. So, an I awake in voiceless heights of trance, the highest state of consciousness in certain religions, in certain pictures of occult experience, is not the form of a god or a goddess. It takes the form of an I, the symbol of consciousness. And here you have a play of opposites, because trance is supposed to be outwardly a state where the eye is closed. But it's not the physical eye. A trance is where one is withdrawn into an inner world of light and knowledge. Outwardly, one may look like as if one is sleeping. The great sage or the Divine Mother is asleep, as she seemed to sleep, to have slept when she used to give blessings in the meditation hall. Actually, she was working very actively in the inner worlds. The physical eyes were closed. So we relate reality with the physical outer form. But reality is much more complex. There's so many layers of truth. So from within, from the higher plane and the deeper planes, what is above is also below, what is in front is also within. The dimensions are completely altered. Therefore, an I awake in voiceless heights of trance. This is again inspiration. Goes straight to the source of light and truth. A mind plucking at the unimaginable. Its mind is an instrument of knowledge, but going beyond the world of thought, going beyond the world of imagination. Imagination is also an image-making faculty. The image-making faculty is what we call imagination. It exists in the world of the mind, which makes images, from which you may make factual or material forms. But what are the worlds that even the mind cannot make, draws outlines of? What are the experiences you can't explain or describe with words? Inspiration will enter into that. So breaking down those areas of the unknown, overleaping with a soul and perilous bound, the high black wall hiding superconscience. The black wall is the wall of the ignorance, the wall of the ego. The mind has a huge ego. To go beyond that, into the world beyond the mind. Inspiration, he's describing her as somebody who breaks down laws, who breaks all laws, who transgresses into territories which are usually forbidden for the mental being. She does not listen. She goes wherever she wants. And she brings back the wealth of truth, like somebody who enters into another's, you might say, field and harvests his wealth of corn or wheat to bring it back to the person to whom she wants to give. There is a breaking down of boundaries, a mind plucking at the unimaginable, overleaping with a soul and perilous bound, the high black wall hiding superconscience. She broke in with inspired speech for scythe and plundered the unknowable's vast estate. So the possibility of the human seeker who breaks out of the mind, who has silenced himself, allowed himself to become open, and the force of inspiration that gives to him the truth, the wealth, the riches of the spirit. He's using the image of the plundering of the estate of the divine, all the divine experiences. All these are things we don't really realize that we could be, we could do, if we could be just very quiet and allow ourselves to be made instruments of something other, higher than ourselves. We remove from ourselves the idea that I am the doer of my deeds, I am the thinker of my thoughts, and I realize I am nothing. Even mothers, in her prayers, she says, I am truly a zero in the world. If she can say that infinite, with that simplicity, why can't we? You say we are nothing. The divine is all.